Hello, everyone, and welcome to Café New Canadians, a virtual event series where every week we discuss topics that matter to immigrants, newcomers, and international students within Canada, and all those who plan to make Canada their home one day. Today, as you can see on your screens, there's a topic that we will be discussing, which is exploring podcast the new Canadian way. We will be talking to three amazing podcasters. We'll hear their stories. How is it that they began podcasting? Some began as a hobby, they've taken it to new heights now, and their stories and a lot more about podcasting that you can learn through this session. Now, Café New Canadians is brought to you by New Canadians, a TV and web based show. You can watch us on Omni TV, you can watch our content on our YouTube channel, and at the same time on our website as well. We bring to you a lot of content related to immigration, settlement, education, employment, and a lot of other subjects related to immigrants within Canada. I'm Shruti Dagan, I'm your host for today, and I'm pleased to welcome the three amazing speakers I just told you about. We're joined by Oscar Cecena, Dapo Bankole, and Mifrah Abid today, all three people who've got amazing podcasts that they will be talking to you about. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
It's lovely to have all of you join us today. Before we begin, I'll quickly just remind the audience joining us either on Zoom or on YouTube that you can share your questions with us. If you're joining on Zoom, please share them in the Q&A tab. If you're joining us on YouTube, share them in the chat box, and our guest speakers will be answering them during the webinar. So once again, welcome to all the guest speakers. It's lovely to have you over here with us today. How's it going?
Thank you for having us, Shruti.
It's a pleasure. So before we jump, thank you so much for being here. Before we start discussing the details of podcasting, let's go around the virtual room and just hear a little bit about all of you. And that'll give our viewers a better understanding of what kind of expertise that you bring with you over here today, and give them ideas about all the questions that they can ask you. So how about we start with you, Oscar?
Sure. My name is Oscar Cecena. I'm from Mexico. I moved to Canada like 7 years ago, and I host the Immigrants of Toronto podcast.
Lovely. Dapo, how about we go with you next?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm originally from Nigeria, came here with my family in 2012, and in 2018 started the Immigrant Life podcast.
All right. Mifrah, what about you?
So I came to Canada in November 2017, almost 3 years ago, and I've come from India. And I started my podcast just during the pandemic, actually in April. And it's Across the Table, and it's about immigrant women in Canada.
Lovely. I think all three of you have a very different viewpoint that you share in your podcast. There's a lot of information that, of course, gets shared. We'll also talk about the frequency. We'll talk about how the idea came about. But before that, let's first, explain to our viewers what exactly podcasts are and why are they so important. Of course, they're growing in popularity. There's no doubt about that at all. Let's hear it from you. Maybe, Mifrah, we'll just start with you here. How would you describe podcast as a medium, and why do you think it's so important in today's times?
Well, I think that's one of the first things I struggled with when I used to send links to my latest episodes to people, and they'll say, oh, we can't watch it. Where do we watch it? And I was like, no, you don't watch it. It's something like a radio show. So I think that's the closest analogy that I could bring. And they used to say, oh, we're looking on YouTube and we can't find a podcast. I was like, I'm not a YouTuber. So I have to explain to you, it's like radio, but it's on demand. You can just click on, come on my website anytime and listen to the episodes. It's something like that. And I think podcast is growing in popularity because they're so versatile. And it requires so little equipment and so little expertise. At least I didn't consider myself an expert in any way. And I could do it. And you can listen to it in almost any setting. Like you're driving or working out or cooking or doing all those mundane tasks. So it's a good alternative to music. So that's how I explain to people who don't know what podcasts are all about.
Yeah, I think you mentioned very correctly that, the ease of accessing it adds to the popularity, of course, a lot. Dapo, how about you? What would your views be on podcasting, and anything that you'd like to add to what Mifrah just said?
Okay, yeah, I think Mifrah, you made some very good points. One of the very ones that catch me my attention all the time is the fact that it's very easy to access. Like, you don't need me. It's unlike YouTube. It's not video, right? You don't need to drop everything else in order for me to listen. So, it's ubiquitous. I can listen to it anywhere. I can listen to it, on my way to work, while cooking, while doing anything without dropping something else. So that makes it easier to consume as a content. And I dare say there is a big future for podcasting as against video. Somebody might contest that, but that's when you see the giants going in a particular direction, when you see Alexa and all the Amazon and all of them going towards voice, there's something there for there's a reason they're going there. So definitely, yeah, podcasting is great. I enjoy it because I'm just being myself, and yeah. And for the other funny thing though is for those who are should I say, shy, or who are introverts who want to hide behind the camera, it's easy on them, right? There's nobody looking at you. You don't have to try and smile and be pretty and, anyway, so that's it. Let me shut up.
So is that the case with any of the three speakers today? Are we making anyone uncomfortable by forcing them to be in front of the camera today?
I think I can do it once in a while, not all the time.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, a choice. And Dapo, I'll ask you, was there something that, Mifrah just mentioned that, the difference between a radio show and a podcast, did you also face this confusion within the audience when you had just begun, or?
Oh, no, actually, I don't remember, like people. The only thing I do know is I started getting feedback from my audience saying, why don't you start a YouTube channel? Why don't you start a YouTube channel? Why don't you, start to record video? I've been having that. So initially I just ignored. I'm not the type that wants to do 1 million things at the same time. I'm like, let me even understand what I'm doing, because really when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. That's a different story. But like, let me even make a success of this to a point, then I can consider video. So for the last couple months, for most of my recordings, I've actually been recording video. I haven't churned them out, but I'm like, okay, maybe at some point I'll be ready to actually start to deliver on what my audience is asking. But no confusion from my part. People just got it and just flowed with it like that.
Yeah. And Oscar, what about you? Was it a struggle or was it a challenge to start a podcast in the age of YouTube?
I don't think so. I think the audiences are quite different. But I agree with what Dapo was saying. Like, I got messages like, hey, can I find you YouTube? Because I don't listen to podcasts, but I do watch YouTube videos. And it was like a couple of weeks ago that I started putting the podcast episodes in YouTube. But it's challenging because you don't want just to put a static image with audio. That doesn't look pretty good. So, I mean, what I did was just using After Effects. I just added a wave, so it's a little more interactive, but still it's not my face and my guest face. So I think it's just a different type of audiences, I would say.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, of course, I mean, now podcasts definitely are a hit, and they're growing in numbers. As Mifrah also pointed out, it's also because of the versatility, the choices available to viewers, or actually listeners, and but what I'm hearing is also this, that there's still an audience that values YouTube, and so while you've been uploading them on YouTube, Dapo and Mifrah, is that a struggle that you faced anytime, or as a challenge that you've had to also cater to an audience that only still wants to consume video content?
Well, one of my guests told me that I asked her, she's quite a famous Instagrammer, and I asked her, what tips do you have for me? And she said, show your face, show up basically on your feed. And I said, okay, let me try that. And I said, okay, let me record a small video and like a few 30 seconds and put it up on my story. I personally hate stories, let me tell you that. They're very popular. I made so many attempts and it was so bad. So what I did was I just put the cut of how it was and said, this is why I'm not on video. So I just can't talk into a camera. I can talk to people if they're on the other side, but I just find very awkward. It's not me, But I can talk into a microphone. I'm just more comfortable that way.
I think there's also that thing about, people wanting to know exactly who is it that they're listening to. And I'm sure that, there's an initial story that is very important. I know for a fact that Oscar, I noticed that, you came up with an episode 0, which was very interesting before you started with your first podcast, as an introduction, as a little idea to the listeners, just to give them an idea about yourself. So would you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of the episode 0, that it's almost a year that I launched that one, so it's pretty cool. The idea of that one was to, like, first just a quick introduction, like 2 or 3 minutes of what the podcast was about. But the other one was like, it takes about 2 weeks to get into the Apple podcast after you submit the feed. So I wanted to episode 0 to be that one. So when I launch episode 1, it could go directly to Apple Podcast and Google Podcast and everybody. So kind of serve those two things. That was the idea.
Dapo, was this a problem that you faced initially, or how is it that you went about introducing yourself to begin with when it came to starting a podcast of your own?
How did I do that? I don't even know. The reality is when I started, I, I initially I was I was kind of like scared, when nobody, this is something I didn't learn from anywhere and all that. So I had all that apprehension. But one day it just occurred to me, I was supposed to launch long before July 1st, 2018. I didn't launch because I was just fearful kind of thing. But one day it just occurred to me, like, you know what? Nobody knows I exist anyway. So if I go there and I just do whatever, nobody's really going to know. So why not start? And I just thought, I'll just do it anyway, and I'll take it as a feedback. Whatever anybody says, I'll use that to improve. I did have a big challenge with what do I focus on? What do people want to hear? And all I try to figure it out, and it became analysis paralysis for me. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to start somewhere, and I don't care anymore, and I just churn it out. I'm even embarrassed sometimes when I go back to listen at my beginning. I'm very embarrassed that I even did that. But you know what? If I didn't do it, I wouldn't be here today. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. Also, you're looking
That
for.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get into asking you how the idea came about and how you all chose your unique topics, let's go around the room again and hear a little about your podcast. Tell us a little about it. Dapo, while we're with you, let's just hear it from you first.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so my podcast, my target audience really are people like me, and I don't mean people of color or people from Nigeria. That's not what I mean. I mean first generation Canadians, pretty much. That's my target audience. They could be new, they could be, I've been here for years or whatever. I just believe we all have the same struggle, and at the same time, we have the same opportunity. So why did I start? I struggled a lot when I came in here with my family, and it took like 9 months for me to eventually land my professional. I'm an IT professional. To land my professional job, I did a sort of stuff, and I learned a lot in the process. And I'm somebody who, when I fall down, I want to look back and like, why did I fall? And once I understand why I fell, I try to start warning people that are coming, like, hey, something might. So because of that, I started getting involved with the immigrant cycles, and we'll be doing all sort of things. And then my name got out there, my numbers got out there. And eventually I realized I was actually saying the same thing, answering the same question to different people multiple times. So it was getting tiring. Like, this is no longer efficient. I have to find a way to at least say it and other people can access it. I had no idea there was anything called podcast. No idea at all. So until I was having my master's program and I needed to interview some people somewhere, and I had to buy some mic and record, and then that occurred to me that, wait a minute, I could do that. Then how do I put it online? Anyway, eventually I found a way to put it online. So it's been very interesting, because what I found is that people really want authentic stories. It's not something in a blog or something one random person wrote, but they can actually hear a voice and say, hey, I was blind, but now I see, that kind of a scenario. So people want to hear that. And it's just naturally just grown because people want to hear stories, like I said. And my focus as well is actionable insights. It's Immigrant Life Podcast. I want people to hear something and be able to run with it. It's not theory. It's not what we read in book or something like that. That's my focus. So actionable insight, first generation Canadians. Yeah, that's been my focus, and it's really worked again, because I get message from people I don't even know from Adam, and they're like, thank you, you're doing this, thank you for that. And that's the fulfillment I get from it.
Yeah. I think you shared some wonderful story. You've of course shared a wonderful story about how it all began, but I'm not too sure if you shared the name with our viewers as yet, which is Immigrant Life.
Yes. So yes, thank you for that. So that's the podcast name is Immigrant Life Podcast, accessible from immigrantlife.ca.
Yeah. And the name, of course, gives it away that, it's so much more that you can learn about immigrant life within Canada, and they can learn from your experiences as well. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Mifrah, how about you? Why don't you tell us a little about your podcast?
So my podcast is called Across the Table. And it has some echoes that Dapo said, about immigrants and their struggles. But it's not just that. I just wanted to talk about the narratives that are not necessarily immigrant, but also in terms of representation. Like, I see so many people who are doing so much amazing work, and they don't get the representation in mainstream media because, for various reasons. And especially with women, I think that's it's doubly hard to get noticed. And so my guests are not necessarily first generation immigrants. Some of them are second generation immigrants. But the question always they're asked is, where are you from? As if you still don't belong here. So I said, why not turn that question on its head, like make it a positive experience? So one of the first things I ask my guests is, where are you from? And I think that's the source of richness, the source of strength, not something to be embarrassed about or not something to, be, defined about. So that's the first thing I ask them is like, where are you from? And that's a great thing that I think Canadian life is enriched by so many cultural narratives. So I've tried to keep it more diverse. Of course, they're all women, and most of them are Muslim women. For one reason is that I feel they're very misrepresented, not just underrepresented, but there are a lot of stereotypes, about us. And I don't want to keep it exclusive to that, but I just want to say, okay, look, we are normal women too. And we are contributing to society in different ways. So this is sort of an acknowledgement of the work that people are doing out there. So I try to focus on that. So, while most of my guests are first generation women, there are some who are second generation, but they identify with more than one culture. They speak more than one language. They dress in more than one way, and they're still Canadians, and they're still contributing Canadians, and they're making Canadian life better. We are the richer for their experience. So that is what my podcast is about. And personally, I think the biggest benefit I have had is the rich experience of listening to them and interacting with them. So I think that's the biggest, thing that I have earned from this podcast.
So definitely, diverse voices and inspirational stories of women all along. That's lovely. I applaud the effort, of course. Oscar, before we come to you, I'll quickly just take a minute and remind the viewers that, all your questions, please keep sharing them with us. We'll hear Oscar's story and how he started the podcast and a little bit about him. And then we'll quickly jump to your questions. Please keep sharing them on Zoom as well as on YouTube. Don't shy away. And Oscar, coming to you now. Tell us a little about your podcast.
Yeah, so mine, I think it's kind of a mix between both of the other podcasts, because when I started it, my goal was, again, I saw that maybe not specifically discrimination, but, as an immigrant, you need to prove yourself twice. So I thought about the idea of, if I share immigration stories, if I am able to reach Canadians so they understand the struggle that is being an immigrant. And when you come to a new country, you leave everything you know behind. You come, you need to adapt. If they learn that, they would be able to, empathize with our situation and just make it a little more bearable and for everybody. However, kind of in the middle, I've been doing the podcast for a year, but I would say if 5-6 months into the podcast, I started realizing that most of my audience were immigrants or newcomers or people who were about to come in. So I started shifting the narrative a little bit. So I still interview people and I still want them to share their story. But I also started adding some podcasts on advice, like Dapo was saying, like something that if I was in their situation, what would I want to learn? So that's kind of what it is right now. I don't know if it's going to stay the same for the next year, but it's just been evolving. I mean, if you think about it, right, it started with the idea of being a blog and ended up being a podcast. So I'm pretty sure in a year it's going to be quite different than now. So that's basically it.
You also shared that, the idea, one of the aims was to open people's minds through these stories of immigration. So were you successful somewhat in reaching out to a lot of people? Would you like to share an anecdote or two of somebody who, felt that it was through your podcast that they were actually able to maybe, come up with or understand another perspective, the way that they didn't think about earlier?
I can share one. It's funny. It's at work. The VP of sales of the company where I work at, he always listens to the episodes and comes back with feedback. And one of the things he mentioned at some point was that he was impressed on like how people leave immigration. It's not that you just come to a new country and you settle as if it was your own country. Like there's a lot of things you need to learn. You need to learn the culture. Sometimes you need to learn the language, or at least make it better so everybody can understand you. So every time that I interview someone, he comes with comments and he's fully Canadian. I don't think I know anybody more Canadian than him. So it's quite interesting to know that. So at least if I was able to open one mind, I'm happy with it.
Definitely, of course. So let's also now, it's been wonderful hearing your stories. It's been wonderful hearing how is it that, you began the podcast. Let's get deeper into the topic of podcasting and understand some nitty-gritties of it as to, I see some equipment behind some of you, and tell us if that's really necessary, or if I want to become a podcaster tomorrow, can I just maybe start it with the humble earphones that I have and just the computer audio and mic? How about you, Dapo? Let's hear it from you.
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. Yeah, this is the mic I use today, but absolutely, this is not where I started from. Okay, so I started from one very tiny mic like this, and there was USB, So, looking back, what I would say if I was to start all over again in the same condition I started, I would even start with your kind of mic. Like, I don't care. Like right now, I'm just at that point, really, I don't care as long as people can hear me, because what I find is that it's my audience that are really going to tell me what they want to hear. They are the ones that are going to shape what I'm doing. And like my mentor always says, you don't have to get it perfect. You just have to get it going. So you can start anywhere is all I would say. Like you don't need to delay, a wonderful idea because you don't have money for a mic or like all those things. For me, it's not necessary. Like you can start from where you are. As you grow, you will, become bigger and bigger and bigger, and you can make better decisions. So that's all I would say. Yeah, about starting out.
And sometimes, it starts out as a hobby, and either your career comes in the way or something else comes in the way. Sometimes you realize maybe that's not something that you're really enjoying as much, and people just move away from it also. So maybe it's not it's a good idea to actually not invest in all the equipment to begin with, and give it some time, see, get your rhythm going, and then of course, if it's something that's working for you and if it's something that's working for your audience, then maybe, is that an advice that you would give to the viewers? Or
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's the other thing, right? Most of us, most of us venture into things like this as passion. It's what it is, right? Passion, and that's it. So, but I also find that, like Oscar was saying the other time, started as a blog, now it's a podcast. I don't know what tomorrow holds, right? It might become a vodcast tomorrow, like video blogging or whatever it is. So we explore as we discover ourselves. We make more informed decisions, and I think it's fine. You start it, you don't like it, you are not in tune with it, drop it and move on. Start whatever else you want to do. That's all I ask. Like, but at least start. That's my own position. Yeah.
Oscar, I see some equipment behind you as well. So tell us a little about that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, but you don't really need all this because it can get quite expensive if you start adding up. I I would recommend at least a good microphone in case that you're doing that because yes, you can do with your even your computer microphone, and it's possible. The problem is that once you upload it and people start listening, and they will compare it with the other podcasts that are out there. So sometimes the quality it's good. It's just perception. You might be saying something really important, but if the quality of the audio is not good enough, they might just stop it, and they're not going to reach that point. So I would say, and maybe you don't need like a super expensive microphone. There are microphones that you can pay like $500, even $1,000. You don't need that one. This one is a Blue Yeti. I paid like 170, so it's not that bad, but still it adds up, right? Like it just continues to grow. But I would say I agree with what Dapo said. Like you don't need to get it perfect. Just get it like good enough. As long as you like it, there's somebody else who's gonna like it as well.
Thank you. Mifrah, what has your equipment evolution been like?
I have to admit, when I saw all the equipment behind Oscar and Dapo, I was kind of intimidated because I'm the most tech challenged person you ever meet. So my husband manages all the tech bit, and I wouldn't even know what kind of mic to buy. So he got me this little thing, and that's probably the only thing I've kind of invested in the podcast. It's a snowball microphone with a pop filter, and he does all the research, and he started all the sound mixing and the sound editing and softwares like Audacity, and he taught me that. So I was like, when I saw their equipment, I was like, whoa, I don't have anything to show. So yeah, I started very basic because if anyone can take inspiration from me, I'm really the most tech challenged person you'll probably ever meet in your life. So I can tell myself I could do it. I'm pretty sure anybody can do it.
That's the intent of this webinar as well. I mean, of course, all of our participants who are joining us, anyone out of them or the ones who watch us later, if there's anyone who actually has those hopes and dreams of being a podcaster one day, I think all of you have just, given them more encouragement and that confidence boost that they needed, that it's not so much about the equipment, but it's about just clear voice, of course, going and content that tops everything. Let's take a question. Sherdil Khan, who's joining us on Zoom, has shared that, he started a podcast on cricket and he wants to know if it's a good idea to stick to one subject that is one person's niche or go and talk about different miscellaneous subjects. Mifrah, what's your view on that?
I think it always is a good idea to narrow down your audience to the T to start off with, because what happens is you may be catering to everybody, but no one in particular. So that's one of the first thing I learned when I was looking up how-to videos on podcasts is just identify a niche, identify your target audience. So I kind of narrowed it down to such an extent that it has to be Canadian, it has to be with immigrant root, it has to be women. So I said I can't narrow it down any further. And once I've got that base, and then I can move on later. But so far I've just done season 1, so I'm still sticking to my base right now. So that's what's worked for me. Because if I talked about just women, there's so many different topics that unite, describe women. So why would they listen to me otherwise? So that is my take on it. Others can differ. I'm not sure.
Oscar and Dapo, your take on it, if it differs from what Mifrah just said.
Tell you, Oscar.
Okay. I think it makes sense to find a niche as Mifrah is saying. I mean, if you like cricket and you might want to expand a little bit into other sports, I think that's fine. But if you start talking about cricket one day and politics the next one, it might be a little confusing for the audience. So as long as the topics are related, I would say just go for it.
Now seems like a good time to also, ask you, how did this topic come to you? Was it exactly what you had in mind when you began? And you shared that, you pivoted a little and you're also sharing advice now, Oscar. But for all of you over here, was this exactly what you had in mind when you began? Or is this something that slowly evolved into what it is today?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would say this was what I had in mind. But did I have this much clarity? No. So, and that's why I chose to start with my own experience. I just knew, my focus was really, I will tell you, I suffered. And my family suffered, and that was very painful for me. And I thought, nobody deserves to go through this, right? Will we go through it? Yeah, some people will, some people won't. So all I wanted was to come up with content that helps, like so actionable, that at the end of the day, helps people to thrive. So for me, like if you go check my website, that's it. That's been my line all along. I want you to thrive, actionable insight. So that's what I started with. But did I have that clarity? No. I jumped from this topic to that topic until, and so, but it's been evolving because now again, like I depend on my audience. Ask me questions, tell me what you want to hear, kind of thing. So now I bring in people. I ask them questions and throw light, not just on my experience, because I don't know it all. I can't make all the mistakes, right? Everybody else has to bring in their own to the table. So just late last year, then I decided, you know what? I want to make things even easier for my audience to be able to grab my content. So I'm like, I've been thinking, how do I do it? I had no idea. I'd asked people different viewpoints. Eventually, I came across Zig Ziglar. He actually has something called the Wheel of Life, where it focuses on core areas of life, and it feels that if you focus and you're excellent in those areas, pretty much you thrive, you do well, whatever that means for you, right? So, and that's, I decided, you know what, yes, that's what I'm going to do. Now I focus my content and topic and interview my guests on those areas: social, like relationship, career, finances, even spiritual. I know some people don't want to hear that, but that's fine. That's part of me. And now I also added Canadian heritage and culture to that. So look at that. That only happened like a year and a half after I started. So I do, believe in what Mifrah said and what Oscar said: niche down and do all those things. But again, my worry with trying to get all those things up front is that you will probably never start. So I'll rather make, start as imperfectly as I can, and I will recover. That's my belief. So I love being niche down, but I won't let that hold me back. And that will be a good advice that I'll give to anybody. Yeah.
Let's take another audience question. Dapo, I'll stay with you for this one. Aurora is asking us, what is the most important lesson that you've learned from doing your podcast?
Everybody has a story to tell. That's it. I mean, seriously, like everybody has a story, and that story changes my life. Like that's it. Everybody has a story to tell. Like what I hear in my podcast, it changes me. Like it just changes my life. I can't even understand some things and why some things happen. And so and you maybe I am not answering that properly. What I mean is that, you see, that person that just passes by you on the street, or the person that sat by you on the bus, has some of the most profound stories that you could ever imagine. So, but if you keep to yourself and you keep quiet and all that, you will never even have the opportunity of even hearing that story. So it's helped me to be more open, to be more intentional, to be a better listener, and to be more perspective. So I don't know if that answers that question perfectly, but yeah.
Of course you have. Oscar, Mifrah, would you like to add to that? What's your learning been?
I would say something in the lines of what Dapo said, is that when you listen to these inspiring stories of these women who have actually beaten all the odds and come, reach where they have reached today, it's very inspiring on several levels. And I see myself like, oh, I'm just 2.5 years into Canada, and I see their journey. Like they all started pretty much like me. And look at them today. They had children, they had 4 children, 5 children, they had financial issues. They didn't have jobs which, were commensurate to the education they brought from their home countries. But that didn't stop them, and they're just doing something for the good of others. So I think that was very inspiring for me personally, that, these are just barriers, but they're not something which you can't overcome. And I think it's all about the community, of immigrants, and we learn from each other. And, basically, there's a sense of communal bonding that we have with each other. So my podcast is something like a sisterhood, I would say, is that I identify with so much of them. They're so different from me in a lot of ways, but they're, as Oscar says, actionable stuff that you can just, borrow from others. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, building a network and learning from other people's experiences.
Oscar, how about you?
I mean, what they were saying makes perfect sense. Like everybody has an interesting story and all that. But I think if I had to pick one thing, is that immigration is just hard for everybody. Like it doesn't matter if you came with a job, like your company arranged your moving, like a new house, whatever you came to. It doesn't matter the way you arrived to the country. It's going to be hard at some point.
I'll stay with you, Oscar, for the next question. So let's also discuss a few basic things about podcasting. What should the tempo of narration be? Should it be slow? Should it be fast? What would you recommend? For someone who is starting out their podcast, what's a better tempo?
That's a good question. I never thought about that even in my own episode. So I would say try to keep like a consistent pace, so it's not too fast and then too slow. Like maybe you can go medium. I don't think I'm answering anything, but if you can go kind of like in the middle, I think it would be good. However, I think one of the things that you're doing, if you're speaking, you can, if you start speaking faster, you can like transmit the action if it's happening in your story or whatever you're telling. If you want the listeners to feel that there's some urgency or action, you just start speaking faster. If things are calming down in your story and whatever you're saying, maybe just slow down a little bit. And that will help also with engagement, and people are going to enjoy what they're listening to. I mean, I'm not saying that everybody should be like a voice actor or something like that, but if you can transmit that, if you listen to an audiobook and you listen to what they're doing, you will learn a little bit about pacing.
Well, actually, personally, I'm no expert at podcasting, but, I mean, I can, what I might want to share over here is that, when I talk to all three of you, there's so much character also in each of your voices and the way you express yourself. And that I think also adds so much to your content. So maybe it's just best to stick to you and your natural self. Like when Mifrah was talking, there's just so much energy in how she speaks. And it's just fun to hear a person like that. And, why would you want to really know their experiences and hear them talk to others? So, Mifrah, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, the number one feedback I got from people was slow down. Everybody's like, oh, you're too fast, you're too excitable, you're all over the place. And, you have to give your guests some chance to think. And I was like, okay. And I have to make a conscious decision, slow. Now, get back to my listeners. Was it slow enough for you now? It's like, no, slower still. So I think that is the feedback I'd give to others. Just don't be like me. Just slow down.
Yeah. I can see Dapo smiling. What would you want to
Yeah,
add to that?
really, you spoke my heart, really. What I wanted to say is, you know what? Just be yourself. Just be you. Like, I'm not, again, maybe I'm stubborn as a person. I could be, right? But seriously, I just want to be myself. I don't want to be fast. Like, if you even listen to the intro of my podcast, you will see the music I chose, the way I mean, I didn't do the intro, the guy, my voiceover guy, I chose somebody who could just be calm. That's the way I talk. I mean, I don't have as much a deep voice as he has, but I just want to be me. In fact, these days I come in recording and I'm like, guys, I'm tired today. I don't even feel like recording. But you know what? There's something that occurred to me and I feel I want to share about it. That's it. I just say, like, I just want to be me. So now, if me means I'm going to be very fast, of course, I will confirm, I will acknowledge, Mifrah, you said it. People ask you to slow down. When I started, I noticed I was actually like a bit fast and people gave me that feedback. But the reason I was being fast was that wasn't me. It was because I was afraid. I was scared. So when fear comes in, my mouth goes dry and I try to talk fast and all those kind of things. But later on, I just realized that, come on, man, just be you. If they don't like you, then they are not even for me anyway. They're not part of my tribe, kind of thing. So that's what I would say. Just be you. If you talk fast, go for it. If you talk slow, whoever is for your tribe will stay with you. That's my position.
We're talking about voice. We're talking about each person projecting their voice a certain way. There's also this thing to do with accents. Canada is a multicultural country. Canada has so many people from different places. All of us are also catering to an audience that has newcomers, immigrants. Tell us, I'd like to know your experiences. Is there anything you'd like to share about anything that your listeners shared with you, feedback that you received, any hesitation to begin with? Um, I see you smiling again, Dapo. I'll start with you only.
Well, that's fine. It's because I mean you're just bringing up very good points and well thought out questions. Yeah, accent. Yes, that was a concern for me at the beginning, and I remember before I actually launched out, somebody gave me a feedback on my intro and said, on I think I did some test episodes, and the person gave me feedback and said, "This is odd." Like the person who did the intro was, is a Black American, deep voice, very clean and all that. And then I started out and said, "Your accent give you," and I'm like, so that's really my energy went down when I got that feedback. But you know what? Again, I'm just like everybody has an accent. Everybody's got an accent. So what's the big deal? You understand? So I'm like, even if you're American, you're from Nigeria, you're from Lebanon, like it doesn't matter where you come, you speak a certain way. And I cannot like divulge myself from how I speak. Like I just thought I'm just gonna be me. I'm just big on being authentic. So people giving me feedback and all that, but you know what? I can't change it. My kids, yeah, the other is it okay if I share this? The other day, I asked my little boy, my second son, he's 11. I asked him, to go help me get some cucumber and just slice them and bring them for me and all that. And the guy was looking at me for a few seconds, like, "What are you saying?" I have to be describing. You don't know cucumber? It's green. It's long. When you open the fridge, it's like he was just looking at me like, "What is this guy saying?" I'm like, "Ah." Eventually, I said, "Oh, cucumber." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So my accent. So now you're telling me that I have an accent. So my kids definitely it's easy for them, but I don't have a problem with it. I speak the way I speak. All I want is I just want people to understand what I'm saying. So that's what matters to me.
Mifrah, what is your view on this?
So it's a double-edged sword for me because I was an English lecturer back home in India, and I have to teach pronunciation and the received pronunciation, American accent and accent correction to people. But I used to keep telling my students that I don't sound American or British. I'm just telling you how the individual sounds are like. So when I came to Canada, I started my training as an ESL trainer, that is English as a second language. So a lot of people said, you know what, the link centers that Canada has for newcomers, people wouldn't want to learn English from a person like you. And I was like, "What do you mean by person like me?" She said, "Because you sound too Indian and people want to learn English." And I'm like, okay, well, they don't have a choice because if I'm teaching them, I'm teaching them because that's how it is. So yeah, I understand the problem that accent is not going to go away. We can actually try to come close to the standard to be more intelligible, to be easy to understand to other people. But it stops there. You just cannot become a native speaker. And I'm okay with that because I think it's like a superpower to know two languages so fluently. I keep telling my kids, you guys are poorer than me in that front. They can speak like Canadians, but can they speak Urdu like I do? No. It is true. Accent can be a barrier, but it shouldn't. It shouldn't.
For sure. Oscar, what would you want to add to that?
There's not a lot I can add. I completely agree. Like, it could be a barrier, but it shouldn't be a barrier. I've never received any comments about my accent, and I think having an accent is pretty cool because it also relates to what you're doing. Like, I'm talking about immigration. I'm talking about immigrants. I feel that I should have an accent in order to be credible about it. But I think as long as people can understand what you're saying, as long as your point come across, I think that's it. And especially in Toronto, especially in Canada, having an accent is just, you're half of the population who wasn't born here. So yeah.
It's you and your authenticity, and just being authentic is what, of course, matters the most. Let's take another audience question. So we've been discussing why podcasts are a hot medium. What would you want to say, Oscar, about the future of this medium? Do you see it fading away in a couple of years? Is it here to stay? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it's going to fade away at all. It's if you compare it with TV and YouTube, it's kind of the same thing with radio and podcasts. You get radio on demand, and everybody can upload what they want. Again, we go back to what we're saying in the beginning. might be a niche. Some people listen to podcasts all day. Some people don't listen to podcasts. So in the end, I think it's going to stay like that. I think more people are going to start listening to it, but I don't see it fading away, like not in the near future.
Mifrah, I'll come to you for the next question. So Marcella, who's joining us, is asking that do you plan your podcast episodes to all be the same length, or does it vary depending upon the topic?
I really try to make it under half an hour because I feel people have very short attention span in the days of YouTube. But sometimes the speakers have a really great story and I just cannot edit it beyond a point. And then sometimes I do a disclaimer, you know what, this is going to be like 38 minutes. So please bear me because it's really worth it. But generally I try to keep it under half an hour. But then that's me. I have, my husband listens to a lot of podcasts that go on to 45 minutes. And especially when you're driving, that's pretty cool. You know, I would like the longer episodes. But I think during the pandemic, I would prefer shorter episodes. So,
Dapo, what about you? What's that sweet spot?
I would say from my experience, the sweet spot really is around 20 minutes thereabouts kind of thing. And I'll tell you why. That's, it's part of feedback that I've had and also experience. I find that people want to listen to me when they're going to work or coming from work and those kind of things. And usually the average transit time, on the train kind of thing is like that 15, 20 minutes kind of thing. So they really don't want to come back and try and remember where they stopped in the morning or something kind of thing. So they just want to pick one, finish it and move on and pick another one kind of thing. So that's really the sweet spot. Do I keep to it all the time? No, absolutely not.
Oscar, so, so far we've talked about the equipment, we talked about the time, the presentation style a little, the cost involved as well, because, all of you shared that equipment does not really take precedence over content. Tell us about the aptitude. So what, according to you, when you started out, is this something that you had in mind for a long time, or what, according now that you've had experience for a while, what is it? What would your advice be to anyone who plans to start a podcast? What's that, what's the aptitude that is required or the must-haves, so to say?
I think the first one is you need to be creative. If people are going to listen to you speaking every week for 20 minutes or whatever the podcast length is, you need to be creative. You need to keep people engaged. You also need to be good. If you're interviewing people, you need to be good at listening, because sometimes you might want to touch a point later that people talked about in the beginning. So it's very important to be a good active listener. I think the other thing that's very important is, again, we're talking about this in the beginning, it's like you need to be comfortable talking to a microphone. You need to be okay with your English level, your accent. You need to be okay with that, and you need to be comfortable with that. And I think the last one I would say is just that you need to, whatever you're talking about, you need to transmit that with your voice, because people cannot watch you. So if you're getting excited, you need people to think about the commentators from a football match. Like whenever they're reaching the goal, they started yelling, and even if you're listening to the radio, you get excited because they're transmitting that to you. So you need to do the same. So if you're getting excited, if it's an interesting topic that you want to touch on, and I don't know, like someone got their citizenship and you want to transmit the emotion that person is getting, you need to feel it and you need to transmit it to the audience. So I would say those three things would be my main takes on the aptitudes needed to start a podcast.
Dapo, would you want to add something with respect to, music now? Because this is a medium which is all about audio. Besides your voice, besides the content that you share, the guests that you bring on your show, or the tips that you give, music, sound has a huge role to play. Anything in terms of that? Any tips that you'd like to add to that?
Music, I don't know. Like, seriously, I won't be academic about that. I haven't done much research about it. I can only speak to me, and my observation is that, for me, I just pick the music that I think flowed with who I am, just resonates. Should it rather be focused on my audience? Probably yes, but I started where I was. So. I don't know, Mifrah, you probably.
Mifrah, any tips that you have to add to these, resources and tips that you would like to share with the viewers? Anyone who's interested in podcasting, what is it that they should remember?
Be good at social media marketing because social media is a huge place that you can attract new listeners. And as I said, I hate updating my stories on Instagram and Facebook. That's one thing I absolutely hate doing. But then somehow people notice that the first thing. Like I would rather put posts, and I use a lot of promos for my guests. Like I make video promos, and that's when I use music also. That's primarily where I use my music from. From the music free audio libraries. And I always like peppy, tapping numbers, like foot tapping numbers. And my husband will go for more mellow tunes. So that's where we always have an argument over. But so get savvy with social media. Because if you're not on social media, at least on a few platforms, you can be savvy on all the platforms. But at least one or two platforms, like either Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and Twitter, take a combination that works for you, and just be very proficient with that. So yeah.
Sure. And while we're talking to you, why don't you also share a little about, now we've been discussing struggles, we've been discussing the journey that you've had with your podcast and the learnings as well. Any anecdotes or any other piece of learning from, say, a guest that you had on your show that you'd like to share here, Mifrah?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have made a lot of gaffes. I've recorded the full session and then realized I uploaded only my voice and not the guest's voice. And that gives a nervous breakdown to my husband. It's like, what were you thinking? And then I have to go back to my guest, like, please, can we do this again? And it's happened 2 times, and both times the guests were so accommodating. It's like, I know, life happens, it's all right, we can do this again. But it's really embarrassing. So I'd say just check your equipment once, twice, thrice before starting recording, and make sure you've recorded everything before you shut down your systems, because I'm pretty bad at this. So as I said, if I could do it, pretty much anybody can do it, because I've made a lot of mistakes and I've learned a lot in the period of the full first season. But yeah, there have been some really embarrassing things happen behind the scenes also.
Sure. Oscar, I'll come to you for the same. Any anecdotes that you'd like to share, with all the interactions that you've had with so many people, what has stuck with you?
That's a very good question. There's one in particular that was kind of interesting. It happened kind of in the beginning when I started just posting in social media if anyone wanted to participate. There was a woman from Colombia that contacted me. She said she wanted to tell her story, but she didn't want to be recorded. And even when we met for a coffee, and even then, she didn't allow me to record it, so I just had to take notes manually and then just transcribe the story. It was a hard story because she had to escape from drug dealers over there and all that, so she didn't want to be found. And when I aired the episode, I emailed her to tell her that it was live, and the email bounced back saying that the email didn't exist anymore. So I was just thinking that kind of got stuck in my head, because if someone is facing that type of pressure and fear, but they still want to share their story, and what she wanted is to let everybody know that you might be in a hard situation, but you can escape. That's what she wanted to do. And I think she did it, and I ended up just writing what she told me and sharing it by myself. But that one in particular is stuck. It's still one of the hardest one that I've done since I started the podcast.
Sure. I actually also wanted to ask all of you, do you select your guests yourself, or I'm sure you do, but is it something that can people reach out to you if they have an opinion to share? Is that something you would encourage, or would you want to just go about selecting? A show of hands would be good over here, just for our viewers to know that can they reach out to you if there's an opinion that they'd like to share on your podcast?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So we will, of course, also be sharing the URLs of your podcasts towards the end of the webinar. That's how anyone joining us today, you can reach out to these 3 amazing podcasters, express your views, hear them talk to so many amazing guests, and share so many more actionable steps as well. Quickly, it'll be nice for the viewers as well if we could just go through the process of it. So Mifrah, why don't you share from ideation to the final execution, when it gets, when it airs, what goes on in your mind, or what's the process like in terms of the number of hours or days that it takes?
I went through my episodes fairly quickly. I did 13 episodes in 12 weeks, and I wanted to wrap up season 1 because everybody was at home during the pandemic, and I wanted to really milk it for all it's worth. So I generally schedule the informal chat first on Zencaster, so I can test the audio quality. I just, to get to know the speaker. And then I schedule a date for the actual interview. I record for about 40 or 45 minutes, and I try to edit it to 25 minutes or less, sometimes more. So it's almost half of it. I'm just editing it out, all the ums and ahs and repetitions. And sometimes I ramble on a lot. So I try to edit myself out the most because it's not about me, it's about the guest. And then I put a promo, like a 30 to 40 seconds promo on social media, and then I have the release. So I generally followed a thing like on Thursday we have the promo, on Saturday we have the release. So, and that's how I went for 12 weeks, nonstop. So that is how I did it. Now I'm going to start season 2, so it might be different, I don't know.
Dapo, I'll come to you for the next one. Anything that you'd like to share from your experience hosting this podcast for so long? I was just talking to Oscar and Mifrah. They've shared their experiences. A story that's somehow just stuck with you, or your interaction with anyone that you'd like to share over here before we go for a final round of tips from all of you.
Like a story from my podcast that stuck with me. Well, amazing. Yeah, there have been a couple, but I think one that's really just comes to mind now is the story of one of my guests from India, actually. So she moved here and they didn't have a job, but they had a plan. And what amazed me was that plan actually, like, it worked. Like in a short time, they had a plan. They were going to get a job, and if they were not going to get a job, this is what they were going to do and all that. And they chose they're going to live in the basement to save money. But why that really has stuck with me is the fact that I'm like, really, you could actually do that. I thought I had a plan when I came. You probably heard the quote that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, kind of thing. So that was what happened to me. But this person's plan actually worked exactly the way she planned it. And that continues to amaze me. And I use that story to let people know that, what? Our paths are different. The fact that somebody struggled like me doesn't mean you need to struggle. Like, time and chance, make your plan, do your best, and just leave the rest. There are certain things you can't control, but a lot that you can control, just do it and leave the rest, because like that person amazes me. So that story always stays with me. I use it to encourage people to say that don't give up on yourself. Okay.
And with that, it's been lovely hearing all your experiences, the stories that you've shared. But before we wrap up over here, it'll be nice to hear from all of you, your one last piece of advice that you have for our viewers, maybe your 30-second advice that you have. But before that, I'll also just tell the viewers over here that we will be reaching out to all the 3 speakers, and how amazing would it be to know the other podcasts that they themselves listen to. As experts, you host podcasts. I'm sure that you listen to others as well. So we'll take down your favorites, and in our post communication after the webinar, the communication that we have with all the people who've registered and participated, we'll share your favorite list as well. So coming back to you, Dapo, what's your last piece of advice that you have, related to maybe a tip that you have for anyone attempting podcasting, a lesson that you've learned from your experience, your last piece of advice completely?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think one thing I would say is be authentic, and whatever it is, just do it. Like, seriously, just do it. Just be authentic and just do it. It's just, every other thing for me is secondary. Maintain your authenticity and just carry out whatever it is you want to do. You will get it perfect along the line, not immediately. That would be my last advice.
So don't wait for that one day when finally you will begin your podcast.
No, it never. Oh, come on! It never comes. Like it's never gonna even come. Actually,
Yeah.
You continue to grow. Yeah.
Mifrah?
I would say just find out what nobody else is doing and do that. I mean, of course, I would agree with Dapo, like you have to be authentic, you have to be you, it has to be a topic that is close to your heart, but there's always one perspective or one angle or one, aspect that someone else has not covered, and just tap onto it. Like I was talking with women, and I just felt, there's a sisterhood out there and we want to share our stories, which is very unique to women. And I just went with that. So there's always something which somebody else hasn't done before. So just look for that.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like you, there must have been a lot of women who must have thought that, women are not really being represented the way they should. You just went ahead and did something about it. So applause, definitely. Oscar, coming to you.
I think the only thing I would say is, like, if you're trying to do a podcast and it's a hobby for you, it's not going to be a full-time job, just try to make things simple for you and less time consuming. I remember when I started the first episode, I think it took me 9 hours to edit it because I wanted it to be perfect. Now what I do is I just record it in one sitting. I try to monitor the time, so the editing process is maybe an hour, and that's it. So I actually have time to do it. It doesn't become like a second job. It's actually my passion project on the side.
Thank you so much for your wonderful insights today, for the amazing information you shared, your encouragement to the viewers of just going ahead with their hobby, passion, whatever it is related to podcasting, or just listening to amazing podcasts like yours to learn more about life in Canada, learn from your experiences, and get some amazing pieces of advice. So thank you once again for being a part of this webinar, and it's been lovely having you all over here. On your screens, to our viewers, this is for you. You will be able to see resources, URLs of our guest speakers, and that will, of course, that's a way that you could reach out to them. You will learn more about the amazing podcast that they host, and keep listening to them. That's exactly what we would request for you to do. This was yet another session of Café New Canadians for you, which is brought to you by New Canadians. We have a lot of more sessions planned for you. Every week we come over here, discuss new topics that are important to newcomers, immigrants, and international students within Canada. We've got more lined up, so watch out for those and connect with us on social media. You'll stay updated with all the things that we have to share with you, and reach out to us, tag us in your journeys. So you can see on your screens all the platforms that we're on. The handles are right there in front of you. Please do connect with us. Another way to reach out to us, another way to actually stay updated and get our content would be if you subscribe to our newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter, and you'll get all the information that we have to share with you. A little survey that we've put together for you would pop up on your screens. We would request for you to actually just take a minute to answer that. It would be lovely to hear from you, learn that how is it that we performed and what is it that we can do better to serve you the next time. Thank you so much to everyone who stuck around with us till now, and it's lovely to have had these amazing speakers. Thank you.